Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Daso. I'm with the Lakewood Chamber of Commerce. I'm the Education Task Force Chair, and we're just getting organized here. Our plan is to kick off the formal part of the presentation, hopefully by 2:05. We're getting the logistics worked out with Mayor George and with Claudia Dillinger from the HR department. But we do have Patty Ryan on with the Lakewood Chamber of Commerce. We have Chief Malley and Chief Dunphy connected as well from the police force and the fire department. And as soon as we get the mayor and the human resources director online, we will get started. I do want to let you know some of the record keeping, housekeeping items for the presentation today. I think we have about 60 people connected already, which is a great turnout for the participants. We are going to ask that if you have any questions, to please, at the bottom of the page, there should be a Q&A button next to the chat button on the bottom. If someone wants to, Maria, I know you sent previously, if you want to submit either through that or through the chat. The chat actually might be a better method for submitting any questions. We're going to go through the various speakers, and each will have about 5 to 6 minutes of content that they will share. I may have some immediate questions as a follow-up. And then at the end, we've reserved about 20 minutes. So from about 2:40 until 3 o'clock, where we can take questions from the attendees as well. So I thank Maria Shin for sending a chat. It looks like that's going to be the best method for any questions. Lauren Small will be from the Chamber of Commerce, will be reading through the questions that are posted in the chat area. So if we do have duplicate questions, we'll make our best effort to ask just the single questions, try to consolidate some of the questions for the various panelists. With that as an overview, I do want to say we really appreciate, hopefully once we get the logistics worked out with Mayor George and with Claudia with the HR department, we really do appreciate participation of the 4 panelists from the city of Lakewood here today. It's helpful to hear the different departments and they each have a little bit of a different input on this, and it's going to be, I think, very informative to get how they'll be addressing this. Me personally, so once again, my name is Michael Daso. I'm on the Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. I'm our education chair, and I also have a small business here in Lakewood. I've got 4 employees in my office, and it's been really challenging to try to determine personally what's the best timing for them my employees to come back to work. I think back to March 23rd, when I had my employees start working remotely from home, and wow, that was almost 2 months ago. And the difficult thing is not having a crystal ball or perfect answer in terms of what's coming down the road. So I'm looking for insight from the family and from the city, insight from the Chamber of Commerce, to at least give us some guidance on some thoughts and considerations. I am seeing a chat question. I'm glad these are coming up about access to this recording later. Yes, we will be able to submit this recording. It is being recorded, and you will have access to it at a later date. So for those of you wondering if you need to take notes, it will be available following today. So yeah, I see a couple of questions coming in, some very specific questions, and that's helpful. So please do go to the chat at the bottom of the page if you do have any specific questions. Patty, I don't know if you're available to potentially get started, and Lauren might be able to work.
Well, actually, our first presenter is Mayor George, and she is on.
Is she on now? Excellent.
And so we're still trying to get one of our panelists on. For some reason, she's having a hard time connecting, but we can go out of order if we need to, and until we get her online. So
okay,
you can go ahead and start if you want.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start with Mayor George then. And thank you, Mayor George, so much for coming on this webinar today. We really appreciate your time. And personally, as a business owner, I've noticed some of the assistance that the city has given. I know the rent relief program was certainly well participated in. But why don't you give us a little overview on what programs the city of Lakewood has for the businesses, and just your thoughts and insights as we do start to reopen.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to participate on the webinar. I hope everyone is staying safe, staying healthy during this really difficult time, but keep saying we're all in this together, and we think we certainly are. I really enjoyed the partnership with the Chamber of Commerce, Lakewood Alive, among others, to really work together to help everyone get through this unprecedented pandemic we find ourselves in. I wanted to talk a little bit about one of the programs that we initiated early on, which is the Small Business Rent Relief Program. Early on, I recognized that this was going to be more than just a health crisis. It was going to be an economic crisis as well for our small business community. So we established a small business rent relief program, which was available to Lakewood businesses that had a storefront in the city of Lakewood. They were less than 50 employees, and they were negatively impacted by COVID-19. So they applied through our planning department, and I'm thrilled to say we are able to award 118 grants for rent relief, with over $187,000 in grants provided to our small business community. This is really to help our businesses bridge the gap from the time they were closed to the time that we can reopen again, which we're already kind of starting to see the reopening phase within our community.
From a timing standpoint, was that mostly then for April rent, would you say, Mayor George?
You know, by the time we were able to get to the funds into businesses' hands, it could have been used for April or May. There were some questions that we needed to follow up with a lot of our business partners with, so that just took a little bit of time, but it was either for April or May rent they could use it for.
Okay, so these grants have already been paid out then?
That's correct. They've all been paid out. We're looking at potentially implementing a phase 2. We're working right now to see if that's something that we could put together. You know, one of the good things with being first is you're able to get funds into people's hands quickly, but we also realized that we weren't able to capture all of the businesses that needed our help. For instance, some smaller businesses that didn't have a storefront weren't able to capture because they weren't part of the qualifications. So we want to capture those in the next round of funding if we're able to do that.
Okay, thanks for that detail.
And so we also created the a small business task force. The first meeting of the small business task force was in March 27th to be exact, to get the business community together with Lakewood Alive and the Chamber. Sorry, I have a phone call going off. To work with our partners at Lakewood Alive and the Chamber of Commerce, and then different representatives from different spectrums of our business community get together, really address the needs of what businesses were going to have through this fluid situation. So one of the things that came out of that task force was this Together for Better. It's really a campaign to focus on shopping local and shopping safe. And we'll be rolling out this campaign here soon. And on the screen, you can see some of the visuals of what that campaign will look like. And again, the goal of this is to support businesses as they reopen, and really to encourage people to patronize our Lakewood small businesses. Every time that we visit our small business, we're helping them survive this pandemic. So keep shopping Lakewood, keep shopping local, and make sure you're shopping safe. So we're going to continue encouraging residents to wear masks when they're out in public, following the CDC and the governor's guidelines, and to make sure we're following social distancing processes as well. Again, at the end of the day, this virus, unfortunately, is still out there and it's still impacting our community. So although businesses are open, we still need to stay safe and make sure we're not bringing this home to ourselves or our loved ones that we live with.
Okay, do you say, so this is really a marketing concentrated push, it really feels, to try to drive business to the small business community inside Lakewood? Is this like a social media tagline that we should be aware of, the Together for Better? Do you have any more details?
That will be a social media tagline. So Shop Safe Lakewood and Better Together. And there's also going to be a print version as well. There'll be the ability for businesses to put a sign in their window reminding people to shop safe, shop local. So we're working on rolling that out as we speak and hope to get the final details together by the end of the week. So look for more on the Better Days Ahead and the Shop Safe local brand coming soon.
Okay. Mayor George, thank you very much. We're starting to get questions, I'm noticing in the chat line, on some of the logistics, I think, of masks and enforcement. Just want to reiterate for any participants that may have more recently joined the webinar that we do have a panel. There's 5 panelists. We're going to go through and get about 5 minutes input from each one of the panelists. So some of those questions may be answered as we go through the panelists. If not, we will definitely circle back to those specific. I think a lot of it is geared towards, at least initially what I'm seeing on the chat, mask wearing enforcement. So let's go through the panelists, and then if we need to, we'll circle back to that at the end. So next we have Patty Ryan, who's the CEO and president of the Lakewood Chamber of Commerce. And I know you did a survey, the Chamber of Commerce did a survey. I think you have some input from that. And then anything else you're seeing in terms of input from the Lakewood small business community, Patty?
Thanks, Mike. And thank you, everyone, for your patience as we go through technical difficulties. It's kind of a sign of the times, isn't it? There's always one glitch out there. But so thank you for joining us. We have a good turnout today for this Zoom webinar, but there's important information. And thank you to everybody who participated in our survey. So we sent out a survey on May 8th. It was emailed out to all the addresses that we have currently listed in our distribution list. And we were asking kind of status questions, like where are you on the reopening curve? And at that time, obviously, our retailers and restaurants were phasing into being able to open up. Some of us are still phasing into that, but many offices were able to reopen following certain guidelines. And what we were really trying to figure out is what were the obstacles to reopening? And depending on the type of business you're in, obviously it's pretty specific to that. But one of the big challenges, obviously, everybody, and I'm very proud of Lakewood for taking the health concerns so seriously, but everybody was first and foremost concerned with keeping the public safe and healthy. And then the next thing that was going to be more of a challenge was obviously the social distancing, the face masks, as far as having employees wear face masks, gloves, whatever was indicated by your industry. And then protocols as far as being able to educate and have signage for your customers or your clients. But the other thing is, because of some of the current mandates and social distancing, it didn't make sense to some people to open up yet. They were going to kind of wait until maybe some of those protocols relaxed. But it helped us kind of develop, you know, kind of a playbook for small businesses here in the community based on the responses that we've gotten so far. And if you haven't been able to participate in the survey, it is open until the end of the week, till Friday. And we're getting, you know, again, some really good information that kind of helps us plan.
Patty, is that on the Chamber website, the survey?
Yes, but we also emailed it out, and I believe it's on our social media page, on our Facebook page too.
Okay.
So again, or they can just call us and I can email them directly the link. So the number one thing we found out is it really depends on your industry, your business sector, as far as the best practices go. So you need to kind of put together a game plan and gather information and best practices through reliable sources, whether it's the City of Lakewood, Lakewood Alive, the Chamber of Commerce. We're sharing what we have, but also, you know, for your industry, if you have an association, make sure you check the State of Ohio's website to make sure that you understand the protocol for reopening your business for your business sector, because it's obviously very different for a restaurant than it is for a small office. And then again, one of the things that, you know, everyone across the board, which I was very proud to see, really thought is important, is to prioritize safety. So as you reopen, make sure that you and your employees are on the same page. You have a game plan about general hygiene practices, what PPE or personal protective equipment you'll need, the social distancing requirements for your industry and how you're going to implement that. And then what if somebody gets sick? You know, what if somebody does test positive for COVID-19, one of your employees? You know, how does that affect your reopening plans? How does that affect your staffing? So again, just make sure, number one, that you're prioritizing safety and you are following the right protocol for your industry. So once you know that, you make a plan. You need to know kind of your budget. One of the things that we're learning from the restaurant community, for example, is that with social distancing, it's going to impact the number of seats they have per evening, and especially if they don't have an outdoor dining option. So make sure that you understand, with the limitations for reopening, you know, what your budget is, what you plan to bring in, and how you're going to, again, using the space, the physical space of your business or your location, that how you can implement the social distancing protocols if you need to have you know, certain things for point of purchase or cash register, you know, make sure that you understand what's needed and you have a plan for that, that you've contacted your suppliers, that they know that you're ready to open, and that the goods and services that you get through your vendors, they're going to be available when you want to reopen. And you might have to decide which products and services you'll initially bring back. And obviously, you know, the revenue impact will obviously make a difference in how many maybe of your employees you can bring back at the very beginning. You might need to phase your reopening based on your budget and your revenue. And so it's important that you communicate the plan to your employees. Make sure that they understand. You take some input from them. They might have great suggestions. Same thing, make sure you're constantly messaging your loyal customers and clients, letting them know what your plans are to reopen. They miss you, they want to come and do business face to face. But in the meantime, what are you doing? And as I said earlier, make sure that your reopening plans are clear to your vendors and your other partners so that there's not an obstacle that's thrown up just because somebody was unaware of your plans. And then you have to execute it.
Question. I noticed in a lot of the interest is getting maybe supplies, personal protection equipment. I've noticed there have been some emails that have come out from the chamber, but maybe if that got lost in the shuffle, where could a business owner go to maybe get some information from the chamber on some of the resources that are available?
Yes, so we have a page that we have put together great resources. There's on PPE materials, signage, plastic shields for point of purchase, a variety of things. And it is listed on our resource page on our website, but we also share that information with the city of Lakewood. So if you go to onelakewood.com, right on the homepage, there's a COVID-19 business resource link, and you can go there. And then Lakewood Alive has also been emailing out good contacts for vendors for PPE and other signage issues that you might want to put up for instructions for your customers, cleaning supplies, etc. And I have that link in the PowerPoint, and I'll make sure that it's shared to all the attendees today.
Okay, yeah, if we could send that as a follow-up after this webinar, that would be helpful, Patty.
Yeah. So back to the game plan. So you need to execute it. I think this is all pretty common sense. But I think that, you know, one thing that you have to think about is scheduling, like a timetable of how long this will take you. You might be surprised, especially maybe if it comes to trying to find PPE products for your employees, that you have to recalculate your estimate as far as when you're going to open. And also, you know, one thing that's always important is always to ask for feedback. You got to be ready to adapt. As we've all learned, it changes day to day. You know, the rules will continue to change. What we hear from the state of Ohio, you know, will continue to change depending on the curve of the pandemic. So make sure that you're ready to pivot when you need to, and that you've got a game plan or a plan B in place. You know, we really encourage people not just to wing it. Analyze your sales data, your return on investment, so that you can make rational decisions that will, again, help you survive the curve of this pandemic until we're back to normal.
Yeah, it sounds like a good temporary plan. However long that temporary plan might be is the prudent course of action, Patty.
Yeah, and again, as I said, it's just continually mapping out your road back to normal. And you know, we anticipate that some businesses might put their toes in the water. They might open and then decide that due to maybe a lack of foot traffic or other, you know, situations as far as trying to comply with social distancing, that they'll take a step back for a couple weeks and then try again. And so just again, I think that's going to be normal. But the better your plan is and the more you anticipate, probably the smoother your transition back to work will be.
Thank you, Patty. I think we should move on to Claudia. But one final comment, I think it will be interesting if the chamber can try to gather some of that data on best practices and what's working for some of the restaurants, retail, general office success stories. I think that could be some good data to perhaps try to look at future surveys as well, Patty.
I agree.
Okay, next we're going to have Claudia Dillinger, who's the Director of Human Resources for the City of Lakewood. And I think, Claudia, I'm interested to hear your input, particularly helping to coordinate one of the largest employers in town. There's hundreds of employees that work for the City of Lakewood. So in addition to some best practices for some of the participants online, I'm curious to hear what the City of Lakewood is doing themselves.
Sure, thank you. So yes, we have really been making this a coordinated effort, and we obviously are probably doing things a little bit on a larger scale than some of those on this call that may be smaller businesses. But you know, we are meeting frequently as a team with all directors and department representatives to make sure the city operations are working together and collaborating. You know, we've had employees who have needed to be on leave to care for children not in daycare or school at the time. So we are moving employees from department to department to make sure we are covering all our bases and continuing to provide the services that the residents of Lakewood expect, that high quality service, and we want to continue to deliver that, just as I'm sure our businesses want to continue to deliver to their customers at the same expectations prior to the COVID pandemic. So we've really been collaborating. As Patty touched on, we ourselves made a playbook that instituted phases for the city of Lakewood. So we would know on a little bit on a time frame as we move through the pandemic, as things lighten up and become easier, how the city's going to transition through that. And then there's some policies from the federal government and through the state that we've been putting in place to alleviate stress on some of our employees as far as leave that they may have needed, which I'll go into in more detail here in my presentation. So.
Okay, so you're referring, I'm seeing the first slide, the Shared Work Ohio. This is a resource. Can you give us a little bit more detail on that?
Yes, so the Shared Work Ohio program, and you'll see the website below, but essentially if you have employees that are not returning to the same amount of hours that you had them previously working, this is a program that you can help alleviate that reduced pay that your employees might be going through. So it allows employers to furlough employees, but make them whole by submitting an application through the Department of Job and Family Services through the state of Ohio. So, you know, some small businesses may be exempt from participating, but if you go to the website, it has some great information regarding who can participate and what the program's really all about. But it's a great way to try and make your employees somewhat whole, even though they're losing some hours.
So this would be different than unemployment. This would be maybe part-time work.
Correct. So it can be an employee that's part-time or full-time. They can take anywhere from a 10% to a 50% reduced hour schedule. So it's still considered unemployment, but it's really initiated by the employer opposed to the employee. The employer submits the application and then they work with their employees to be a part of this program. And then they collect the unemployment, but they're still working. So it's really a benefit to the employer to retain their trained staff. And then it's a benefit to the employee because they're getting some sort of pay and not having to be off work completely.
Yeah, I think this will become really important when the 8-week window of the PPP loans. I know a lot of businesses, the ones that were fortunate enough to get the PPP loan, oftentimes they're keeping their employees at full pay for that 8-week period. But when that 8-week period ends, I think there's going to be some adjustments that need to be made. So this could be a really good resource for that.
Absolutely. And then as Patty, touched base on, I think having a playbook in place is very important. It's basically your policy manual, the protocols you're putting in place while moving through this pandemic and emergency situation that we're all experiencing, whether it talks about the safety of your staff, the safety of the customers or patrons coming into your business. What are the expectations of your staff when you reopen? What are the safety protocols you're going to expect of them? What measures are they taking their temperature before they come to work? Or what PPE are you asking them to wear? All of those types of things are something that should be in one document that all the employees can know that they're on the same place and on the same page.
So is the city of Lakewood working towards putting a document like that together for their employees then?
We do have one, yes. And as you can imagine, it's a fluid document. Things are changing daily as we get announcements from the governor's office. And so we are ever changing it. It's updated weekly and sent out citywide to all employees. And then, departments are posting it, all the changes, so employees can see what's going on. So we do have a playbook in place, and we'd be happy to share that as a working document that businesses could use.
I think that would be extremely helpful because I look at a small business myself. I don't have, the experience that you do when it comes to trying to develop these sort of documents.
Right. And, it's going to be unique to every business.
Sure.
As Patty touched on, different things for restaurants and small businesses. But ours does have some general topics that really everyone should have a part of their playbook.
I think that would be really helpful, Claudia.
Great.
Looks like the next slide. Did you address what you wanted to on the phased approach though?
Yes. So really, I think just talking about, what are the really tight protocols you're going to start with, and then as things become easier and, as we move through this, how are we going to adjust as needed? So those are just things to keep in mind.
Sounds like being more cautious initially
Yeah.
is a good way to handle it.
Correct. Another thing that you may need to keep in mind, there was a new federal program put out there called the Families First Coronavirus Act, Response Act. And what this does is it provides leave to those who maybe need to be quarantined due to contracting the virus or having to care for a loved one. Again, you may be, as a small business, you may be exempt from providing this to your employers, but anyone with 500 or less employers are required to offer this. And us as a public entity, the City of Lakewood, we are also required to offer this benefit to our employees. So, I think you should go to the website, review it, see if you are exempt from this, or if it's a benefit that you need to be offering to your employees when they return.
One quick question I'm noticing in the chat, just because it's timely, is is there a difference between for-profit and nonprofit? We have a lot of nonprofit organizations in Lakewood as you're giving this information, Claudia.
Not necessarily. It's really going to be more on an employer size basis. So they'll want to go to that website and check that out.
Okay.
And then the final thing I wanted to talk about is an employees assistance program. And our scale, we work with a vendor who's providing programs for our employees, but I have included on here, it's as simple as if you wanted to go to YouTube and Google how to assist your employees as they're dealing with this. There's some great webinars out there to help employees who maybe are caring for loved ones, whether elderly or children, during this difficult time. If you're a leader, how are you managing your staff? How are you taking care of yourself as you're taking care of your staff at the same time? Checking in with your mental health is really important at this time. And there's some really great tools out there that can help you and your staff to do that, to make sure that as you're assisting your customers, you're also caring for yourselves. Managing your employees in the new normal. There's a lot of changes out there that everyone's adapting to, but they're not easy. Change is never easy. So helping your staff manage through that, taking care of yourself as well is important. So there's some great tools out there available to make sure you're looking into to take care of yourself and your employees.
That was EAP, you said, would be the acronym for that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll probably have some more questions for you at the end, Claudia.
Okay. Thank you.
Next, I think we're going to go to the Lakewood Fire Chief, Tim Dunphy. Chief Dunphy, if you wanted to address, I think you're going to talk about some of the information that's been posted by the state of Ohio through the Responsible Restart Ohio program.
Just a few items that I would like to touch on. I don't know, can you hear me?
Yep, you're coming through loud and clear.
Okay. One thing that was mentioned a little bit earlier, there's a lot of questions out there about how people are going to manage the social distancing, especially in the bars and restaurants. And some of the things that the CDC recommends is that wearing of cloth masks when people come into your establishment or you're providing masks for your employees. The CDC is still recommending that employers offer a cloth mask to their employees so that they can reserve those different types of PPE, the N95s and surgical masks for first responders and frontline people, out in the hospitals and stuff. So something to consider for all the businesses, since they're required to wear masks, that they, encourage the cloth type mask that can be washed. And there's a number of recommendations on a number of different websites, but the CDC recommends, how often to wash it and how to care for it, how to don it correctly, when wearing them, different things like that, as far as, what your employees can do to help keep themselves healthy and safe. There's also an additional page that offers what to do is if your employees were to get sick. So if you happen to have employees come to work, I know in the city of Lakewood, we've been very forthcoming with all the employees to recommend if you at all feel sick, we encourage you to stay home. We've been checking temperatures since early March. Matter of fact, even in the department, throughout the city, a number of departments, we've been wearing masks prior to even having the governor, order out that businesses wear them.
Yeah, I'm
Just to
curious
check.
about the checking temperatures part, Chief Dunphy. Are you having people check temperatures every morning or just if they're symptomatic?
We have everybody check their temperature citywide before they arrive at work.
Okay.
We also provide a thermometer to them in the event that they happen to forget to do that at home. And because of our schedules here at the fire department, we actually check our temperatures every 12 hours. So we'll do it in the morning upon arrival, and then as a second shift, 8:30 at night. So just in case you were to get somebody that would, develop a temperature during the day, we would then, deal with that, at that time as a
Yeah,
patient.
what would I do as a small, one of my one of my employees comes in with a temperature, are they referred back to their primary care physician, or I'm just as simple as what's the best course of action if that does happen?
Well, the first thing they'd want to do is not to come into work. So
Sure.
the education portion prior to that is important. So if they check their temperature and they call in, if they happen to come in and then, start feeling bad, for example, then you'd want to isolate them as much as possible. And then they would do a self-isolation. And yes, the first course of action is to check in with your primary care provider. And then they would recommend to you what your course of action is, whether that's to stay home. The good news for businesses, and similar to the fire department and the city employees, is that if you're wearing a mask, the CDC still recommends that as long as you're asymptomatic, you can still work, even if somebody at work were to come down with it. If nobody was wearing masks or protective, and somebody were to have come down sick at 10 o'clock in the morning or 11 o'clock in the morning, then it would potentially have infected everybody else.
It could shut down the business then. I
It
guess
could
that
shut down your business. But
that deals with
because,
the importance then of wearing the masks.
correct, and that's why they recommended everybody wear masks, so that if that happens, you can isolate just that one person and still continue to function as a business. Everybody wants to get back to work, but we just want to do it safely.
Yeah,
So
that's the big scare. Yeah, that's the big scare. I could see, all the businesses, that's the big scare of a shutdown, because one person, if you're a restaurant and you have a staff of 40 people and one person comes down with a fever, you don't want that to shut down the whole business.
Absolutely. And the same code's true in almost every aspect of the business world, including the city administration. Whether it be the public works department that works in a certain area, the police department that has, a number of personnel in one area, or the fire department, we would have an entire station house could, very easily become infected. That's why we went to masks early.
Yeah, that's good advice. Okay. In the essence of time, I think we're going to move on to the Lakewood Police Chief, Tim Malley, and get his input as well. And Patty, I think he might have had the responsible Restart Ohio template as well. Did he send that over? So I believe that on the Ohio Department of Health website, I think one of the best resources is they did break out by type of employer very different regulations, both mandatory and recommended best practices based on the type of employer that you are. Because you could have very different needs and protocols for a general office environment compared to a restaurant and bar. Correct, Chief Malley?
Right, and I would suggest that everybody, if you wanted to, could go to that website, and they have it broken down by specific types of businesses. And there are different requirements, some that are mandatory,
Yep.
some that are suggested and recommended for each of those different businesses. For the Lakewood Police Department, we are gearing back up now. We went through a month and a half of some reduced activity because the businesses were down and people were sheltering at home. We weren't having a lot of people on the streets, but we're seeing our calls for services start to go back up now as more people are going out and more of the businesses are reopening. And so our work is increasing as well. Remember, when we will be called to a business in regards to some of these restrictions that have been put on them, our first priority is to keep the peace. We're always going to be there to make sure things end up being peaceful. And secondly, we'll be looking for some of the compliance issues with some of the orders from the Director of Health and from the Governor. And as we see, most of the things that we're dealing with in regards to those orders are the social distancing and the grouping of 10 or more. So those are the things that we would look for if we get a call on a complaint. Our first and most important priority when we get that complaint is to just try to get compliance, try to educate the people that are at the establishment, the owner of the establishment, the employees, and make sure that we just can get compliance to whatever the order wants you to be doing. A lot of times it's just misunderstanding. Sometimes it's inability to be able to actually put these into effect, and they need some help doing that. We'll be able to assist them with that. We're not in the position that we want to be going out and citing people and giving them tickets for violating the order. That could happen if we get some repeated offenses, but that's not our first priority. Our first priority is to make sure that everybody's safe in the establishments. The establishments can get back up and running, and we don't have people feeling unsafe when they're in there.
Sure. Yeah, I think that I hear de-escalation and trying to calm things down, because clearly you have someone that's uncomfortable if they're calling in with a complaint about a restaurant.
Sure. I mean, the person that's calling the complaint is uncomfortable. Sometimes the employee or the business owner would be uncomfortable when we arrive. And I just remind them that, don't be upset, don't be offended if we get there on a call. There may be somebody that perceives something that was out of order, but we're not necessarily going to show up in order to arrest somebody or cite somebody for this. We want to try to help you maintain those social distancing and those groupings of 10 or less. And I would suggest that if we do something like that, and I think we've seen some issues where some business owners are having trouble keeping their crowds down because everybody wanted to get back out and get back into the restaurants, that they need to maybe maintain a little more of a presence at that point of entry.
Yeah, I can see that. Sure.
You don't get to the point where you're overcrowded and then you got to work to get down. Try to be proactive and don't let too many people into the business, which seems counterproductive, but in this time, that's what the order is, and you got to kind of maintain those numbers.
Yeah, we did get a specific question. I think it's appropriate to ask it now. I'm sure you've had to figure this out too. What if there's repeated non-compliance though of a restaurant? What options are there?
So if there's repeated non-compliance, one of the things we can do is issue a citation for an offense of violating that state order. The other would be to make a referral to the Department of Health, the Board of Health, and eventually if it is a liquor license sort of establishment, we could make the referral back to the State Liquor Board, and it could affect their license. So we would have those options as well.
Okay, so it could get serious with repeated non-compliance.
Yeah, and I mean, repeated non-compliance is going to be bad for everybody.
Sure.
And especially if it goes on throughout the state. You don't want to get to the point that nobody is, or many people are kind of ruining it for, the majority.
Yeah, one quick comment on the slide that's on the screen now. This is on the Department of Health website. This is specific for restaurants and bars, where you'll see, you can't read it because of the font size, but it will have the left-hand column of mandatory requirements for that business sector. And then on the right-hand side are recommended best practices. I have a general office environment. So I have 5 people that work out of my location in Lakewood. So my mandatory has different regulations than restaurants and bars. And I would agree. I would strongly encourage everyone that's on this call to go to the Ohio Department of Health website and pull up the Responsible Restart Ohio guidelines for your sector. I'm noticing the chat, it looks like Ian Andrews just posted it into the chat link as well. So thank you. But that's a very good document for your specific business. Anything else you want to add, Chief Malley?
No, again, I think if people need to remember here that we're not in a position of back to normal. We're not in a position of kind of a free for all. Everybody get out and do what you want to do now. You still want to limit our exposure to people, even though you can go out and have a meal, have a drink, and have a good time. But we're not back to normal yet. And I think large crowds coming out are going to create that problem. We don't need to have that yet. So we need to take everything kind of tempered a little bit.
Sure. Okay, so I'm scrolling. Thank you, everyone, for initial comments. We have about 10 minutes left for Q&A, if everyone can hang on. And whoever wants to address this question, but I think there's some, we need some clarification on, certainly we understand the importance of employees wearing masks, but what about the situation of a patron, someone coming into your establishment? What position does the business have in requiring masks to be worn in? And what if someone doesn't want to wear masks? We've had several questions addressing that topic. So I don't know who wants to address that.
I'll take it. I think that you can require your customers to wear a mask. Now, if they choose not to wear the mask, then you could refuse service to them. So long as you're not refusing service based on what a protected situation that they may be in. But if they choose not to wear a mask, you could ask them to leave and not serve them. If you have an issue, it becomes a disagreement that they won't leave, or that it becomes a little bit hostile, then call the police department. We'll come out, we'll mediate it, and we'll come up to a resolution. But
I could see that happening
in your
because
business.
people are very passionate about this topic, Chief Malley. And I appreciate that offer from the police department, that I think it is an issue where someone could say, no, it's my right, I don't have to wear a mask. And so that's a good offer from the police department there.
Right, so that doesn't put you in a protected class just because you want to wear a mask or you don't want to wear a mask. So you could refuse service to your customer for that.
Sure, I assume you need appropriate signage and that sort of thing as well, so that it's clear that that's your expectation. We have, I see
right.
another
more
question.
Information, the better.
Yep. I do see another question about gyms. I know we have a lot of, workout facilities, exercise locations in the city. How might that industry be impacted by the masks? Do we have any details, or is the best resource just to go to the responsible restart? I think there's a specific sector for health and fitness on that website, if I'm not incorrect.
Yes, there is right on that Responsible Restart Ohio Department of Health section. There is specific guidance on gyms. So again, as Chief Malley said, I'd encourage everyone to go everyone here on the call to go to that website and look for the guidance specific to your business.
Okay. We're open for any other questions. If anyone wants to post them to the chat or the Q&A, I'm seeing a couple of other questions. I think we are going to have, and I've seen a couple of questions about just anything else we think we might be able to get assistance-wise for small business grants. I'm seeing another question about any city help, maybe for forbearance of state late fees, licenses, that sort of thing. So a couple of other areas of concern. I don't know if Mayor George, you want to address that?
Sure. So we have on our website, we have a coronavirus update page, also a business resource page as well, that can point you in the right direction for other sorts of resources from county grant information or loans, state, federal, unemployment assistance. So that website will be really helpful for anyone that needs that kind of assistance.
Okay. We've heard, and I have two questions online as well, about trying to utilize outdoor space for restaurants without patios. I think, it's difficult to get, it's kind of a timing issue of if you don't already have an outdoor patio, then you're a little bit behind a business that might have done that in the last year or 2 or 4 years that would be maybe ahead of the curve. And I know there's been some ideas with city council that have been thrown out as trying to be creative and addressing that kind of dilemma that some spaces, restaurants have good outdoor space and others don't right now. So I don't know what flexibility we might have there, but if anyone wants to address that topic as well, that's a question we're getting.
Yes, so we're working to ease some of the restrictions for outside dining. We're looking to permit businesses for a temporary conditional use permit go through the planning commission process. So that would allow restaurants to expand perhaps into private parking lots. We're going to lower the application fee and also have some other kind of restrictions in terms of entertainment and noise for the surrounding areas. But we're working to ease restrictions as much as possible so that businesses can survive this pandemic. If other ideas come along from the business community, we're happy to address those, but I think that's going to be a big help in getting more businesses to be able to sign up and go through the process for outdoor dining.
Okay, we did get a quick follow-up question on the marketing campaign that Mayor George, you had mentioned at the beginning of your presentation. How can they leverage that and when is that going live?
We are still putting the final details on our campaign. We hope to get that out there starting this Friday. And so again, look for more to come. We'll also put that information on our website as well. Again, the idea is to shop local, but also shop safe. As Chief Malley mentioned, businesses are opening up. But we still need to be safe. This virus is still out there. We're still susceptible for it. So there's also an education component to this campaign as well.
Okay. Just two other follow-up questions here. I appreciate all the questions. I'll try to get to as many as I can. Supply can be an issue with businesses opening up and getting the personal protection equipment, both from just having to wait potentially 4 to 6 weeks for delivery. And then also on pricing. I had one person ask a question about small businesses maybe being able to work together for some aggregate pricing to help relieve the cost of that equipment. Anyone, I don't know if Patty, you might have some resources there, or if anybody else wants to address that. Anybody?
This is Chief Dunphy. I would only add or remind everybody that, the cloth face covering, which can be washed, is really the recommended way to go for businesses. And those can be made out of virtually any type of cotton material,
Sure.
which is readily available and relatively inexpensive. And that is a twofold type of situation where not only does the employee and employers benefit from having something they can reuse, but it also reserves the resources for emergency and hospital settings and first responders. Not to sound self-serving, but the reality is that we would burn through a lot more of them than somebody would in that setting. However, if you were looking to get them, there's a number of medical places you do have to be careful. They have increased in price, and they also have, become very short in supply. So we're faced with the same dilemmas. Even though we have medical suppliers, we have been faced with a backlog, and we're still 4 to 6 weeks out on some of that stuff. So therefore, I would encourage everybody to go to the homemade cloth mask. There is a plethora of YouTube videos, and even on the CDC website, it specifically says how to make them. So I would encourage that to be something that the businesses to look into, more of a personal item than a disposable N95 or a surgical mask.
One final question, and then I think we're going to have to wrap up in the essence of time, is the weather's going to get better. We're going to have more foot traffic. We're going to have more people out on bikes. And it's already at times difficult to walk down Detroit Avenue and keep social distancing. So I'm just wondering, any ideas on what we can do as we just get more volume and more traffic out there in the city, and how that's going to be handled.
Yeah, I'll take this one. You know, I think it's up to all of us to make sure that when we are in public, we are practicing the safety measures that the CDC and the governor have laid out. So if you're on a sidewalk, you know, move to the other end of the sidewalk, stretch out as much as you can, wear a mask if you're a person that's able to wear a mask. So it's up to all of us that when we venture out in public, to make sure that we are abiding by those safety guidelines to keep all of us safe in the long run. We as the city are going to do what we can to help that. We're monitoring our parks. We're monitoring other public spaces and the businesses if we get calls. But also it's up to us as well to make sure that we are being safe about it.
Well, thank you. And once again, we want to be done on time and under budget. So this was a free webinar, so certainly it's under budget, but I do want to get done here in the next minute or two. I really want to thank all of the panelists for taking an hour out of their day-to-day. Really appreciate it. And also want to give a quick note that the Chamber of Commerce does have an updated event coming up next week. I believe, Mayor George, we gave you a book, and it seems like eons ago at the Clifton Club. It was January or February. But we are doing a business book read called Brené Brown's book, Dare to Lead. And we're going to be doing a virtual book discussion next Wednesday, the 27th. I know the Lakewood Public Library ordered 20 extra copies of the book. And it talks about dealing with difficult situations, not always having the perfect answer, and being vulnerable about that. And I try to do that with my business, but I think it's certainly timely if anyone on the call has an interest in participating in that virtual book read. It's next Wednesday, May 27th at 7:00 p.m. And we'd encourage you to read the book in the next 8 days and then try to participate in that as well. So once again, thanks to our panelists, and this was recorded. So Patty, do you want to just close us up by saying where you're going to post this and where it will be available?
Here I am. Yeah, here I am. Yeah, sure. A couple other things. We have 2 door prizes that we want to give out.
Okay.
And on social media, we said that we'd give a copy of our business book read book, Dare to Lead, out to one of our registrants. And so we're going to have to email you, since you can't raise your hand up there in the webinar format. But a new member, Nancy Rowland, won the business book read. And then we also have, if you've seen it on social media, on our website, and in our emails, GB Art has graciously reprinted a limited edition of the Lakewood Community T-shirt. A portion of the proceeds will go to feed hungry Lakewood families that are suffering from the repercussions of the pandemic, and it'll go to Lakewood Community Service Center. So we're gonna give away a T-shirt today, and the winner to that is Cheryl Moran from Moran's Clean Sweeps. So congratulations, Cheryl. And Nancy will email you to make arrangements to pick up your prizes. One last thing I wanted to say about the T-shirt campaign is that just today we found out that First Federal Lakewood will match GB Art's donation to Lakewood Community Service Center up to $5,000. And again, to kind of feed families that are affected from COVID-19. We love to see that great corporate citizenship out there. And we challenge anybody else who wants to get involved and match First Federal or GB Art in their contribution. So there'll be more information available online on social media regarding that campaign.
Thank you, Patty. And then just in closing, I did notice some excellent comments still coming through on the chat and the Q&A. For example, Mayor George, a comment that a lot of the messaging that was discussed today would be great messaging to be part of the Shop Safe Lakewood campaign. So if we see any other suggestions from the participants that did scroll in later on, I just want all of those participants to know that we will forward those suggestions to the appropriate party as well. Okay?
Correct. We'll follow up with chat and questions that weren't answered. And also this is recorded, so we'll send out the link if you want to rewatch it or you didn't get a chance to watch it. But also all the important links that our panelists gave today, I'll make sure those are included and shared.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Be safe.